The college began the Executive in Residence program several years ago. It's been quite successful, continues to grow. It's allowed us to bring leaders from business and industry who can share with you, our students, the wisdom that they have acquired through their experience in industry, and share it with you, the leaders of the future. The spring 2012 Executive in Residence is Mark Tyler. Mark is president and founder of OEM Fabricators in Woodville, Wisconsin, a local business. Established in 1986, today it's one of the largest contracted manufacturers in the nation. It's grown to close to 500 employees and has weathered the ups and downs of manufacturing in the United States. He credits his team members with the success of OEM. A firm believer in the power of education, Mark encourages his team members to continue learning and stresses that you should never stop learning. I'd like to add that he earned his MBA just a year ago, so he practices what he preaches. He's a president of the Wisconsin Technical College System Board and a member of the University of Wisconsin Board of Regents. He's also a member of Chancellor Van Galen's Advisory Council for the university. Please join me in welcoming Mark Tyler. Thank you, Dean.
Thank you, Dean Potts. I'd like to thank the College of Business and Economics for inviting me. I was a little surprised that they would select me for this, but whenever you're asked to step up, you step up. I'd also like to thank Chancellor Van Galen, UW River Falls, and Bob Casey from Wisconsin Credit Union for sponsoring this. We're in some kind of tough times when it comes to higher education. And I think that opportunities like this to build relationships between business and higher education for the benefit of students will go a long way to convincing the legislature and other supporters that this is really important. So in starting out, when I thought about what I wanted to share with you, one of the things that I didn't want to do was tell you the same thing that your professors are sharing with you. So just completing my MBA, I think I've got a fairly good idea of what your professors are going to share. Now, their information is well rooted in good research, and I'll put this disclaimer out there now. Mine is stories about what's happened to me. It's anecdotal. I think some of them are interesting. Some of them you may think are silly. But I think what it does is it builds the case for how I think you can define and achieve success, and maybe not make some of the same mistakes that I did and some of the people that I know have made. So the objective today is to provide you a nugget, or Jackie says that's more like a boulder. So I'm thinking big, a boulder of information that you can help to drive your own success. This is me starting out. I'm sitting on Mom's lap. We were kind of a Leave It to Beaver family. Mom was a stay-at-home mom. Dad ran a little trucking company. Some things don't change. I was kind of short and round there. I'm kind of short and round now. Jackie says I was born 40, and so this would have been after the prime of my life. She says that somewhere along the way I kind of lost that attitude and that saunter that I have there, but I didn't think I had, but she's probably more perceptive than me. I'd like to start the discussion and share some stories around rewards and penalties. And the reason that I want to do that is it's real easy to think that we all share the same understanding of what's a reward and what's a penalty. And some of the stories that I'm going to share with you really show that that's not always the case. And sometimes our perception of rewards and penalties are based on how we grew up or our cultural background or maybe other things that are in our lives. My first story is about cow drugs or cow medicine. I had a couple of friends that were veterinarians. And one of the veterinarians was a pharmacist before he was a vet. And this story goes back about 30 years ago. But these people were fairly conservative people. They wanted to help their farmers save money. And some of the drugs that were available on the market at that time were about $10 a dose. And the regimen was 2 doses a day for 20 to 30 days. The problem is that's $400 to $600. And when you're looking at a dairy farmer, back in those days, that's approaching half of the price of the cow. That was an excruciatingly expensive therapy. And being a pharmacist, one of these two individuals knew that this was not a complicated drug to make. So they started making the drug themselves. And they used it in their practice, and then ultimately they sold it to other vets as they heard about it. Now they were selling the drugs for about $2 a dose. So from the farmer's perspective, they were really providing a great value, and they were also making a lot of money. Now, in the early 80s, it was unclear whether the law allowed you to produce drugs and sell them to another vet. Clearly, the law allowed you to produce drugs and use them in your own practice. But I think pressured by the drug companies, the FDA said, we need to clarify these rules. And so they changed the rules, and they said you can produce drugs in your own practice and use them. You cannot produce drugs and sell them. Well, my friends, I'll give them the benefit of the doubt that their values were to help the farmer. They were also making a lot of money. Long story short, they went underground and they started making the drugs and continued to sell them. Clearly not legal. A lot of farmers showed up at their sentencing hearing to support them. They were sentenced to a very stiff fine and time in a federal prison. Even though the farmers showed up to support them because they felt they were doing some good for them, it was still against the law. So that's the first part of the cow medicine story. The second part is visiting the federal prison. So we called it Club Fed. It was a prison camp up in Duluth that was on the old air base up there. And the visiting room was about half the size of this room. And because you could only visit a few times during the week, it was a crowded space. And one time when I went to visit one of my friends, one of the other inmates was sitting beside me talking with, I don't know if it was a friend or a relative, but the discussion went something like this. He said, I'm getting out in a few weeks, and I really got to figure out what I got to do to get back in. And I'm, what? And so it kind of caught my ear, and I listened some more, and he's going through some of the potential crimes that he would commit that would be federal crimes that were bad enough to get him resentenced to federal prison, but not so bad to go to medium security. Well, I didn't understand this. It's how bad can a person's life be? Is it the safety of prison? Is it 3 meals a day in medical care? Is it a warm place to sleep? What about prison was so inviting that he wanted to commit a crime and get back? His definition of success was completely different than what any of us may have thought of as success. Rewards and penalties can be very different. This is a story that's very personal. You saw my baby picture. I was short and round today, and most of the time in between I've been short and round. And in the 4th grade, gym class to me was a place that I really hated. When you think about dodgeball, to the other team, I was low-hanging fruit. I was slow, I was a big target. On a good day in gym class, when the teacher would pick 2 team leaders to pick their teams, I would get picked, maybe second to last, maybe last. On a bad day, they'd start picking teams and they were gone before I got picked. Gym class was a humiliating place for me. I wasn't an academic either. So not being an athlete, not being academic, this was not a great time in my life. Well, early in my 4th grade year, I came in and I didn't have my homework done in arithmetic. And the teacher was collecting it and she said, "Mark, where's your homework?" Well, not only was it not done, I hadn't started it. Well, she was not happy with me. She said, "Mark, as a punishment for not doing your homework, you have to sit in the hall. You cannot participate in gym class." This is like a gift. I can avoid the humiliation of gym class, and all I have to do is not do my homework. This is my 4th grade report card. Rewards and penalties. We have to understand what the people around us are looking for. It's not always the same thing. Learning to learn for me, I said I was not an academic. I'm a visual learner, I'm a hands-on learner. I really didn't start to gain traction in my education until junior high school when I got into industrial arts, wood class, metals class, print shop. Fortunately, I was in a school that had all those things. My grandfather, I think, was somewhat the same way. This picture was taken about 1920. Grandpa St. Marie was a tinsmith. Now, even though he worked in metals and I work in metals, there was never really any connection between us other than growing up. I played in his shop and made dustpans and that kind of stuff. But Grandpa, by all people's measures, I think, was a very successful person. He owned his own home free and clear. He had a really nice lake home, owned that free and clear. He held the mortgages on most of his kids' homes. When he passed away, he left a nice estate. He worked a lot with the state hospitals in Minnesota. He did a lot of volunteering. He was very close to working with his church. Something that most people didn't know about Grandpa is he was illiterate. Never learned to read, never learned to write. I remember Mom telling me stories about when a new manual would come out for a furnace, they did the heating and air conditioning, Grandpa would sit her down and she would read the manual to him. And she always thought it was because he wanted her to learn how to read and practice. And that might be true. It was probably also so he learned how the furnace worked so he could install them. One of my favorite stories about Grandpa was, now understand it was a very different time. Prohibition started in 1919. And Grandpa's values did not include prohibition. He had no problem with people drinking beer or having a shot of whiskey. And so there was this disconnect between his values and what was happening in the country. And one of my favorite stories was when he was building this tank for a customer. It was a copper tank. Now, he was from central Minnesota, and the University of Wisconsin came up with this incredible corn hybrid called Minnesota 13. And if anybody know what Minnesota 13 is other than corn? It's moonshine. And in central Minnesota, in Freeborn County and Stearns County, which is the area where Grandpa was from, Minnesota 13 was one of the hotbeds of bootleggers. Minnesota 13 was the product that they produced. It was corn liquor. And so when you need a fermentation tank or you need a still, who do you go talk to? You go talk to a tinsmith. So one day Grandpa was working on this large copper pot, and 2 federal agents come in and they asked Grandpa, who was this copper pot for? Well, Grandpa's in a kind of a pickle. He can either lie and hopefully get out from under a problem, or he can tell the truth and probably end up in jail and probably get his customer in jail too. Well, even though I feel Grandpa was a man of integrity, he lied. And he said, "This tank is for St. John the Baptist Church." Well, so the next Sunday, Grandpa goes to church, and the priest makes a beeline for him and says, "Leo, there were a couple of federal agents here asking about, some work you were doing. I understand that tank you're making for us is almost done." Before Grandpa could say anything, the priest says, "If they had asked if it was copper, I can't lie, I would have had to say no." Networks are incredibly important. They've been important then, they're important now. The priest wouldn't lie for Grandpa, but he didn't necessarily lead them to the truth either. Relationships are incredibly important. Facebook and LinkedIn, those kinds of things help facilitate them, but the truth is that they will be a foundation for your success if you make sure that they are full of integrity and they share your values. So living your life based on your values. I think Grandpa did, and once in a blue moon when he had to tell a lie to get out of a tough spot, nobody held it against him. Integrity, I love this saying from Paul Gabriel, your integrity is your highest form of currency. When Paul shared that, there was a group of us that were going up on Capitol Hill in Madison, and this was the context in which he said it. He said, "Your money is of no value to your relationship with lawmakers. You can't give them gifts. You can't give them anything. The only things that you have to offer is your integrity and your good advice, and if your integrity isn't there, your advice isn't taken. Your integrity is your highest form of personal currency." So back to my education. So I'm a technical kid. I learned by doing. I learned by actually building stuff. And so in high school, I took a lot of classes like drafting, mechanical and architectural drafting. And one of the other classes that I really wanted to take, and I wanted to take it for all the right reasons. My friends were all in it, and I heard they took a lot of field trips. So it took a B average to get into humanity. I didn't have a B average, so I used my best debating skills to get in, talking with the teacher, talking with the principals, and they actually let me in. And one of the things, even though my motivation for getting in maybe wasn't what it should have been, what happened in that class was really incredible for me. We went to synagogue, we went to the mosque, we ate pierogies with the Greek Orthodox, we studied the Greek tragedies, we studied Shakespeare, we studied other cultures, and this incredible diversity that I thought we were kind of all the same, but this incredible diversity that I was exposed to was really interesting to me. I didn't understand the power of that diversity until much later in my life, and I'll talk about that later. So I got to technical college and I took machine and tool design and graduated technical college, and two incredible things happened to me when I graduated technical college. I fell in love with Jackie, and I landed, and I highly recommend that, by the way. Not with Jackie, but falling in love. And I landed a job at American Hoist and Derrick. American Hoist in the 70s was like landing a job at Google or Microsoft today. They were the pinnacle of engineering for high-end manufacturing companies. This is where any learning engineer or manufacturing person wanted to land. And so I was really excited. In the 70s, success was very clearly defined. Everybody knew what it was. There wasn't any argument about what made it up. It was climbing the corporate ladder. It was making a lot of money. It was absolutely clear. So when I got to American Hoist, my objective was climb the corporate ladder, make a lot of money. Because after all, we knew that was success was. So my first job is that of a data analyst. Now, we didn't have any computers at American Hoist at that time. In fact, computers were not generally in business at that time. And as a data analyst, my job was to go collect information from the source documents, so from time cards and production sheets, and then assimilate that information and kind of package it for management. And the things I